Across the Park podcast is proud to be sponsored by Globe Gas and Heating. For the best kitchen and bathroom renovations, boiler servicing and repair, and central and underfloor heating in the Northwest, head over to globecentralheating.com and quote Across the Park for a free quote. Hello and welcome to Across the Park podcast, the weekly show. We're not on location this week. Judgy is in one of his many holiday homes, but I'm delighted to be joined by someone who is, in my opinion, a better person than Judgy to have on the show. It's our friend Mel Harvey. Mel, thanks for joining us on Across the Park podcast. How are you doing?
All right, absolute pleasure. Yeah, well, not great after the football result at the weekend, but and another well, both results really. The Liverpool result ended up not being the one we were hoping either, did it? But all right, apart from that, stuffed full of Easter eggs. So yeah, long run this morning to try and get rid of some of that.
And a happy Easter to all of our listeners. Me and Mel always have a bit of a running joke that we bring wine. Unfortunately, I've only brought tea this time. It's a little bit early, but yeah, I might have a glass of wine later. It is Easter
early for wine. I had enough wine last night, so
there's always time for more. It's still bank holiday, maybe later, and we hope that anyone who's watching is enjoying a nice cup of tea or a glass of wine. Unfortunately, Mel, we're going to have to get into the game that you attended on Saturday, early lunchtime. Manchester United 2, Everton 0. Not the best way to kick off the bank holiday weekend, and a couple of results went against us. West Ham got a result, Wolves got a result, and we'll get into where the table's moving in later on in the show. But at the moment, what was your reaction to the game on Saturday? You were there in the away end. I think Everton probably were quite lucky to get away with 2-0. Would you agree with that, or?
Yeah, I would say that it probably could have been 5 or 6 if it wasn't for Jordan Pickford. Some of the saves he made, particularly in the first half, were quite something. I need to correct you. I wasn't actually in the away end.
Oh, you were in the posh sheets.
I was sitting next to a friend of mine who's a Man United fan who'd got me a ticket, which was very, very kind of him. So we'd been joking before about me having to sit on my hands if Everton scored, but there was absolutely no chance of that. I made a comment to him at half time about how I thought it should be 4 or 5-0. And he was worried by the fact that they weren't putting those chances away and possibly not reflecting on what a great game Jordan Pickford has. And it was only when I watched it back on Match of the Day yesterday morning, what a great game he did have.
Yeah.
And how lucky we are to have him, because, another keeper wouldn't have made some of those saves, of those reactive saves. He was saving with every part of his body, with his feet, his hands. I'm not sure one came off his knee. He made himself really big at one point when Rashford was right on top of him. So my reflection really on the game would be, God bless Jordan Pickford and thank God for him, because it could have been a hell of a lot worse.
Yeah. Look, I think there's an element of instant reaction, and maybe people say things that they maybe not agree with the next day. But when I was looking on our Twitter on Saturday afternoon, and it's something that I do agree with, but I don't want to go into too much. I think the manager probably got it a little bit wrong on Saturday, and that's the first time for me that he's got it wrong. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have played the same team that we've been playing, especially at home to Tottenham, where I thought there was lots of spirit, and there was no need to really change that team other than the Decore suspension, and he's went with Sims. But I think in game, for me, Mel, not sure whether you agree or not, I think 10, 15, 20 minutes in, possibly he could have tweaked it, and that spell that they had in the first half was just so long. The pressure they put on us, it was always going to tell. Do you think there's an element of maybe he got it a little bit wrong on Saturday?
As you say, it's difficult because Decore's been great, that sort of pressing midfield role. He's been brilliant the last few games. Clearly he fell out of favour under Frank Lampard.
Yeah.
And he's had a bit of a new lease of life since Sean Dyche came in. He's been playing really well, so there was always going to be something lacking in the midfield after that. You could argue Sims deserves his chance. He scored a great goal. It was a really, really good goal, and he showed a bit of power in it as well. And we're so poor up front. It's what do you do?
I know.
Personally, for me, I know you're talking about making changes in game. I might have gone 5 at the back. and then stuck with Gray up front. I mean, Gray is not a striker, we know that, but he's been doing a fairly decent job, and I don't think Ellis Sims is a 90-minute Premier League player at the moment. I just don't think he's got quite up to that. So I probably would have started differently. The way we were getting done for pace, the defence in the first 15, 20 minutes, as you say, there would have been an argument for making some sort of tactical change.
That long ball all the time, wasn't it?
Godfrey's not a left back, and Keane's too slow. There was again, when I was watching it back yesterday morning, there was one earlier on in the game where Keane got done and Rashford was almost in. I know Keane scored a great goal last week, but for me, I don't think he's good. I never have. I know that Sean Dyche sees something in him that the rest of us don't, but I would have gone with a 5, possibly kept him in or brought Mina in, brought Cody back in and just done something. I thought it looked a bit different when Mykolenko came on. We weren't getting beat for pace quite so much, but it's hard. He's got a very poor squad to pick from, hasn't he?
That's it. In hindsight, when we do these podcasts, it's great that we both sound really clever in saying what we should have done. For me, I mean, not sure about you, but when I seen the team, I was thinking, okay, that's all right. But my only issue is I do think I was watching the game down at Bootle Football Club. My little boy was the mascot, so we had the game on in the bar there, and I was watching it, and it felt like every time I looked at the screen, United were attacking. And I just thought we have to change something here. And if I don't know, I'm really happy with this manager, and this is by no means an attack on him, but I do think there's an element that he maybe got it a little bit wrong. We will get into the big game against Fulham on Saturday and maybe what he does change. But a couple of performances that I do want to talk about, and you've mentioned it there. Jordan Pickford. Now Jordan Pickford has had his critics, albeit internally from our fan base, externally from the media, especially down south, because he's the England #1. I think he just showed he showed to me how important he is for this football team.
He's such a brilliant shot stopper. He's an instinctive goalkeeper, and that's everything. That is his best quality. Some of those instinctive saves that he made on Saturday were top draw.
Yeah.
Sometimes I doubt some of his decision making, and he's very hot-headed. He tends to get involved in things that you're thinking, where did you come from? You've just run 30 yards to get involved in that. Some of which is a little bit unnecessary. I was having a conversation yesterday about goalkeepers generally, and we're talking about the great Arsenal sides of years gone by and David Seaman, and how he always just seemed really, really calm. And Jordan Pickford isn't that. You see him roaring at defenders every time there's a chance, even if he isn't forced into make a save. And you could argue is that a good quality because he's trying to make sure everyone's on top of their game. For me, sometimes I feel like he gets so wound up that some of his decision-making can be a bit poor. But put that to one side, he's the best goalkeeper. He's the best English goalkeeper. He's probably the best goalkeeper in the league, really. I don't think there's many brilliant keepers in this league at the moment. Again, when you compare them to seasons gone by, I don't even think De Gea is that good. And he's not. He wasn't tested on Saturday, so
exactly. Yeah, we couldn't even see it.
But Pickford, as a shot stopper, you won't find a better goalkeeper than him, I don't think, in the Premier League, and he showed that on Saturday.
Yeah. Did you feel for Sheamus on Saturday? I felt for him. I thought his reaction is like I don't think he deserved that.
No, and the thing, what you've got to remember is he shouldn't be playing every game.
Yeah,
he's not. He's at the age he's at now, and let's face it, it was never the same after that horrendous injury. I mean, for him to have ever come back from that injury was a miracle, and to be playing at the levels he's playing at his age after having suffered such a bad injury that he did and picked it up playing for Ireland, didn't he?
Yeah.
Is a miracle, and it's all down to him and his professionalism, and he clearly really looks after himself. He probably does loads of extra training to keep in that condition, but you can't expect a player of his age, unless they're Ronaldo, to be turning in top class performances week after week after week, and things like that are going to happen, and it happens on Saturday. And I don't think any fan of Everton would have a go at Sheamus Coleman, and if they do, they need to take a long, hard look at themselves, because he's been a superb professional for us, and I don't really think he should be in the position where he's being asked to play every week anyway. I don't think he's young enough and fit enough to be doing that, and good for him that he is, but inevitably, listen, he's made less mistakes than other players who are younger and fitter than him. So
Look, I love Sheamus. I love him, but I agree with everything you've said there. We're in a situation. I feel we're putting him in a situation that he really shouldn't be in. Now, I get why Dyche is playing him, because Dyche has stumbled across, not stumbled across, but he's got this formation and this team who is seemingly dragging Everton away from things. Fingers crossed, and Coleman's a big part of it. So I can see the reluctance in changing it, but I do think you're right there in what you're saying, and playing him every single game. And I feel so much for him, and he went off injured as well, didn't he? So
he did. You could see that, and then Patterson's come on. I was at the Scotland-Spain game, and Patterson came on for Scotland, and he came on in the game that they had at the weekend that I wasn't at as well. So he is getting some minutes under his belt. Don't know how long he came on for against Spain now. Can't really remember. Probably 20 minutes, something like that. So he is getting some minutes under his belt. So you kind of hope he'll be ready to step in. I think there's a lot of potential there. I think we spoke about this last time. I've got a lot of Rangers friends who really, really rate him. Obviously, you're talking about he was playing in Scotland, so it's a different standard, but they really rate him, and you'd like to think that he can come back in, particularly if Sheamus is injured. I'm not mad on this. Let's stick a centre back out at full back, as we saw on Saturday. It just doesn't work.
It can
you get away with it in some games, but goodness me, I felt for Godfrey on Saturday. He just got absolutely exposed.
Yeah, he has a bit of a mare. I think we've touched upon Manchester United, the result, enough. I do want to get into the possible implications of what that can do because of the results around us. But we've got you on. I think the last time you were on the show, you spoke to Judgy, and we were in the midst of sort of the chaos of the protests, and the board are not attending home games, but they're attending away games in that sort of chaos. I think since you've last been on, the accounts have now been released, and we've seen another big loss. There's rumours now that, well, not rumours, but there's confirmation the Premier League have referred us over to a panel to look at. It just seems, there's a feel to you like every time you turn your phone on, something else is happening.
It's dreadful. It's absolutely dreadful. Last week felt really, really hard. As you say, it felt like every day there was something else. And then we go and get beat 2-0 on Saturday, which just none of it helps, and other results didn't go our way, and none of it helps. You can clearly see, the sale of Richarlison decreased that loss quite dramatically, but it was still a big loss. Football clubs making losses is no big headlines. And Everton making losses is probably no big headlines either. It's the other thing that worries me more, the referral by the Premier League. That's desperately worrying. And I don't think sitting there saying, well, what about Man City? Well, what about Chelsea? The Daily Mail have got an agenda about us. I don't think any of that is helpful. I think we've got to deal with what's there. Everton have, in the eyes of the Premier League, have done something wrong by the looks of it. That's what they think, or they wouldn't have made the referral. So we as fans have got to hope that doesn't lead to a point deduction. That would just be absolutely horrendous. And of course, the other clubs around us want us to get.
They want it, of course. Yeah.
I mean, they're being quite, shameless about that. It would appear that Nottingham Forest are the cheerleaders, so they're probably one of my least favourite away supports anyway. So that's not going to help. But I don't blame them. If it was the other way around, we'd be saying it, wouldn't we? If we suspected Forest of it or Leeds of it.
I was saying null and void when Liverpool were top of the league in COVID. I wanted the whole season gone, so I get it.
Exactly. So I don't blame those clubs. I don't blame anyone else. I think if it turns out, if it happens, it would be absolutely devastating absolutely devastating. I've read quite a lot of opinion that's been written about the accounts over the last week or so, and you've got to take some of it with a pinch of salt, and you've also got to be quite tempered in your reaction to these things, because these things might not happen. But there's some quite worrying predictions being made. So I suppose now all we can, as fans, all we can do is hope. There's absolutely nothing else we can do about that situation. In terms of trying to get the team over the line, I think the fans were massively helpful in doing that last season. Everyone's a bit tired, aren't they? It's like, God, we have to go through all
different,
this
doesn't
again.
it? It feels
Oh,
different
totally.
this season. Yeah. Last season, I'm only speaking personally, but last season I don't know. I was more worried, and in turn, I was going into the game feeling that I should give more. And now I don't know whether the fact I'm feeling different this season is because I'm more confident in Sean Dyche, or I don't know if I'm just really, really tired with it, and I'm just exhausted with having to turn up and drag this team over the line. But it's a good point you made. It does feel a bit different compared to last season, doesn't it?
It feels massively different. I think partly it's the fact it's happened again that nobody can quite believe. I think that's my overriding feeling, is I can't believe that this has happened again. I think because we got out of it last season, there's probably a little bit of you that subconsciously is thinking, well, we got out of it last season, so we're going to get out of this. We're going to get out of it this season. I hope to God the players don't feel like that, because that's not what we need. We need them to be firing on all cylinders. But yeah, it's quite exhausting, and it is. I think there was a lot of adrenaline kept us going as a fan base at the end of last season, and I'm wondering if we've got any of that left. It's just a bit like, oh God, here we go again. I'm just not sure I can bear it.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, if there was anything like a points deduction, that would just be, I think that would just finish us all off.
I think if something happened to this football club because of people above, I dread the images of what it would be like. I think if hypothetically Everton relegated by a 3-point deduction, we've seen enough. I mean, I don't want to get into right or wrong, but we've seen enough scenes that maybe are not good for the football club already. I dread to think what it would look like.
No, and it would be horrendous, and I think people would be wise to remember that to football supporters, they invest so much of themselves in supporting a football team, and it's not just a financial investment, it's a time investment. We laugh because, much to my shame, I'm married to a Red, and you talk about that's every weekend written off, and he also supports, an international team as well. So it's like, between August and May or whatever it'll be this year because of the World Cup, there's however many, every weekend's written off, and that's what football supporters do. And I think people within football, sometimes they forget. I mean, I don't possibly know how they can, but I do think sometimes they forget. And it's a huge financial commitment for people, but it's also that commitment of emotion and a commitment of time. And you hear flippant comments like, "Oh, well, they should get interested in something else, and it's not that important, and it doesn't really matter to them." And I don't agree with that. It's more important than life and death. Of course, I don't agree with that. But I think you've got to remember how important it is to people and how much of themselves they give. And as you say, if Everton was to get relegated because of a 3-point deduction, people would be quite rightly very, very angry. And I agree with you. I don't know where that would end. And I
The
think
images would be terrible, I think.
Yeah, and I think it'd be really difficult for some people to cope with. So yeah, let's hope it doesn't come to that. We might be being overly pessimistic. I don't understand enough of these things and don't understand how the minds of the people who'll be making the decisions work. And the rules are so complicated. Goodness me, it's like you're looking and you go, how can a team that loses so much money breach financial rules?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's bizarre to think that it can go on, but it just shows you how important it is to have everything in order in the office and let the football side of itself be taken care by the football people.
What I do think as well is I think what you've just said there is a really good segue into the next part of the show. I think the football side and the business side, what I would say is I don't think these protests have affected the football side. I think everybody goes into the ground and everybody's behind that team. I
Oh,
think
absolutely.
the manager said as well, hasn't he sort of thanked the All Together Now group for not bringing it into the stadium. Just to put a full stop on this part of the show, where we are as a football club in relation to board members not attending football games and anger, do you see any way back for this board in relation to connecting with the fan base, or do you think there has to be changes now?
I think the next few months will be really crucial. I think what happens with this referral by the Premier League will be really crucial. I think the way that's handled, and I think the way that any of that then leads to renewed or more open lines of communication with fans. I don't think you can just go, oh, let's just ignore them and it'll all go away. I don't know whether that's the line they're taking. I work in communications and PR, so it's quite interesting to watch other people's strategies. But I would say, from what I hear, I mean, you know, obviously I'm friends with a lot of Everton supporters, and you know, there are days when you think, well, no, there's absolutely no way back for that relationship.
Yeah.
But what would it take for that to improve? They're asking, the fan group are asking, the groups that have come together are asking for certain things to happen. So if those things did happen, then hopefully that would improve the relationship. But for the individuals involved, it's probably very difficult because it's all so entrenched now, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So
I think
don't know. I think it's a bit of
they've
watch
been
this
targeted,
space.
haven't they? Individually, they've been targeted. It's not just at some moments in these protests. It's not just the board, certain
It's
individuals. I mean,
it's individual
the
people.
chairman's being targeted. Graham Sharp, Dini Barrett Baxter, they're being targeted as
Yeah,
individuals.
I
So
don't.
it's
Yeah,
difficult for them, I think, to
I
come back
think that the
maybe.
word targeted can be misconstrued, can't it? Because we don't really know. And it's interesting on Saturday because you know, you go and there's all the big. It's the same at United in a way. There's huge banners,
Yeah.
anti-Glazers banners, and when you look at their board of directors, it's very heavily dominated by the Glazers, and I presume none of
Yeah.
them go either. It's like,
No, I don't think they do. No, I don't think they
no.
do.
And it was an interesting sort of comparison, really. I mean, I know there's sale talk, well, not talk there. Bids have been put in, whether the Glazers going to accept them or not.
Yeah.
Bids have been made. The club is up for sale. There is. So I suppose for the fans there, that campaign for them is almost over the line.
Almost. Yeah.
Yeah. So there could be an example of fan activism that's come to fruition. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens there and to see the comparisons. But yeah, it's very depressing. It's awful that it's come to this. It's awful we're having to have these conversations, and it's very sad that the reason it's come to this is because we're in the same position on the football side that we
Yeah, of
were. But
course.
one thing leads to another. If you don't,
Yeah.
it's like anything. It's like any business. If you don't run all of it well, then all of it's not going to perform well, is it? If you don't run your back office properly, then if you run a business where you sell to consumers, if you're not running the back office part of it properly, then the public facing side isn't going to work. So, you
It's
know,
all
all
hand in
these
hand. Yeah,
things.
yeah. It's hand in hand. If Everton invest the Richarlison money, better. If Everton don't post the losses that they post this year, everyone's a bit more calmer. I do think it's got to a little bit of a boiling pot now. I think Evertonians have maybe seen regression to have a billionaire owner. And do you remember when we had David Moyes and even to an extent Roberto Martinez and a lot of people just said, imagine giving these guys the money
Yeah.
to really take, and the money comes in and you get worse, and everyone's just like, it's the most Everton thing ever.
Yeah, it was always the dream, wasn't it, to have a billionaire owner?
Yeah,
And there we go. Be careful what you wish for.
be careful indeed. We'll move on to Saturday's game. Look, West Ham put 3 points on the board this weekend. Wolves put 3 points on the board this weekend. The league table, I think, for the first time in a number of weeks, has a little bit of space between it, and Everton find themselves on the wrong end of that space. How important is Saturday, Mel, for Everton to not only claw that back, but to win the game?
It's absolutely huge. I've just looked at Fulham's. They've not won in 5 games. And it would just be so typical that
Enter Everton.
they turn up on Saturday. When you look at their league position, you'd like to think that at this stage of the season, you're playing a team that are in sort of mid-table mediocrity who, are going to go, well, we're not winning anything. We're not going down. So you'd like to think that if Everton were properly up for it on Saturday and the players were properly up for it and the players played to their full ability, it should be quite a straightforward result. But when you look at that table, there's every possibility that Fulham could get dragged into it if they don't start winning some games.
True, yeah.
So, probably not, but it's so tight. And you just don't know what's going to be going through their heads. They've been beaten in the last 5 games, I think, haven't they? So it's not a great time to be playing them.
Or their manager as well. Their manager, who he is, coming back.
Well, there is an element of that as well, of wanting to have something to prove as well. That doesn't help either, does it? So it's not anywhere near as straightforward it should be for playing a team who I think are 10th, who really haven't got anything to play for. And when Everton have got everything to play for, the whole future of the football club is what they're playing for. It's not just the future in the league, it's the future of the football club, because going down is just so perilous when you're in the financial position that Everton are in. So really, Saturday's huge. It's absolutely huge. And if the players don't realise that and the manager doesn't realise that, well, then they're not worth a carrot, because they really, really should realise that. But it just worries me that Fulham have lost 5 and they might be looking at this as an easy one to turn that around.
Yeah, they'll have their own priorities, won't they? I think the manager will have. Look, that manager was sacked by this board and this football club. He was sacked. He's going to come back and naturally say, I would love to show you why you shouldn't have done that to me. And then what you're saying there, for the team to lose 6 games on the bounce, I don't think all their training this week is going to go into, we don't let that happen, that we go and turn Everton over. And if you're the Fulham manager or the Fulham supporters or the Fulham players, you should logistically look at Everton and go, we should beat them, because Fulham are a better team this season. So there's a lot of things not going for us going into it. I do look at this game as one of the games that we should be winning. I look at, we've got that last week of the season where we've got Wolves and Bournemouth back to back. I do not want to go into there in a must-win situation.
No, they're terrible games. And when you're playing someone who's 10th, you should when there's so much at stake. That's what we're saying. We should be winning. You're not playing a team who's trying to get into Europe or trying to win the league or trying not to get relegated. You're playing a team who it's just like, well, whatever. They're just trying to play the season out now, aren't they? Really?
Yeah. Thinking of Mexico in the summer already. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Totally. So that's the type of game it should be, but
it's Everton.
One of the days where you go into anything with any confidence, really, because you just never know with our team who's gonna turn up, who's gonna look good. My friend said to me on Saturday, "Oh, what's an Arna like?" And I was hot and cold. Said, loads of talent there, but you're just never sure until and he had an awful game. So on another day he would have had a great game. I was pegging him a few weeks ago as, was he going to be this season's Richarlison, because he was so up for it. He's so talented. He seems to have a lot of personality, and I was thinking that's kind of what we need. We need someone who's got not just being up for it, because that's never enough, but someone who's young, who's fit, who's enthusiastic, who can make a connection with the crowd, and who's also got great talents. And I thought, is he going to end up being a little bit of a talisman for us for the rest of the season? It's just not looking that way now, is it?
No, he's. We need someone with sort of like the X factor, if you will. Yeah. Someone like Richarlison last May. I was so happy that he was in this team, because he shouldered the responsibility. I remember his Instagram post. He put an Instagram post up last season, and I think he said, "I promise you, I will do everything to get us out of this. I'll shoulder it." And he scored such important goals. Onana, and I agree with what you're saying. You look at him and you think you could be the one. It's not quite
I
happened.
thought it a few weeks ago. I mean, he's a different player from Richarlison, obviously, but I thought he had that kind of enthusiasm,
Yeah,
bit of a connection with the crowd, load bags of talent. And I was thinking, oh, could he end up being a bit of a turning point for us almost? I
yeah.
can't even remember which match it was. He had a really good game. And then they just got waltzed past on Saturday, didn't they?
Yeah. Look,
And then
would you make any changes for this Saturday? Would you play Ellis Sims again in Iwobi
No.
Central? Would you maybe bring in a Tom Davis or a James Garner or?
I think Garner's got a shout. I think I'd go 5 at the back. I'd push my full back, especially if Coleman doesn't play and he does bring Patterson back in and Mikalenko. I'd probably play 5. I'd bring Cody back in. I'd push the full backs right back up. I'd probably drop Sims and then go back with Gray up front of the zone.
Gray, yeah.
Yeah, I think bringing him on for 20 minutes or something might be a better shout than sticking him in right from the start. I hope I'm wrong. I always say this about players when I criticise them. I hate doing it because they're human beings, and I hope I'm wrong. But I think he's 22?
He's not.
He's not
22 is young. I'm an old man. I'm 38, so 22 is young. But in football terms, it's not really young, is it?
Not if you're going to make a difference. I think if you're going to make a difference, you're showing it at that age. My cousin, who I sit next to at the match, he has got a lot of friends in Sunderland who go the game, and when he came back to us, they were like, "Oh, you're fine, you can have him," sort of thing. They weren't desperately sad for him not to be there anymore. So you think, well, if he's not setting the world alight at that level, then he's certainly not going to set the world alight for us. Then he went and scored that great goal, and I sent my cousin a very cheeky text after that. I was like, so what for all your mates? But yeah, I mean, he really toiled against Liverpool when he played, didn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, he fluffed that chance on Saturday. I mean, he should have just put a boot through it. I don't know what he was trying to do. He was trying to place it in the bottom corner, wasn't he? Or bend it around the keeper or something.
Didn't he? You could see he got scared, yeah.
Because, he's not the best keeper in the world. So, if you just, I would have just hit it with loads of power. Listen to me as if I would have been a great Premier League player.
You're well more experienced than me. Trust me.
I wish he'd just hit it. What I should have said is, I wish he'd just hit it with a load of power and tried to make a save. I think that might have been, and that's inexperience. And he you could argue he needs a run of games, but we're not in a position where we can allow people to have a run of games. Wouldn't it be great if we could give him a run of games to get his touch, to get his confidence, to score a couple more? But that's not the position that Everton are in at the moment. They need proven players who are experienced and who can go and hopefully try and dig us out of something. And as much as Damari Gray isn't a forward, I'd still probably play him ahead. I'd just like to see, if we've not got Doucouré pushing forward in midfield, Garner doesn't really do that for you. I'd maybe like to see someone come in and do that, or play with 5 and just push the full-backs right up.
Yeah.
And try and get a bit of pace coming forward and just, be a bit more attacking. Certainly not as passive as we were on Saturday. I think that's how I would describe Everton on Saturday. Very passive.
There's 2 ways of looking at what I've just said. You can look at it the way I've just first said, where teams have pulled away now and there's a bit of a gap and Everton at the wrong sides of it. The positive way of looking at things, if Everton have just had a run of games of Chelsea, Tottenham and Man United, and we're still outside of the relegation zone. So this run of games now will define where we finish. Is it time to ask Dominic Calvert-Lewin to come back and play through injuries? Do we need Dominic Calvert-Lewin now?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because somebody said on Saturday they're going to wait and just bring him back for the last 5 games or something. And there's an argument that you're better doing that than risking him, as you say, in games where we weren't expected to get anything. I mean, you don't think you're going to get anything against these top teams. On paper, when you compare our side to Chelsea, to Spurs, to Man United, there's no doubting that there's a huge quality gulf there. And there's a huge gulf in terms of results. So, yeah, it probably has been the right thing not to risk him in games where we weren't going to get anything anyway. But I think if he's anything like fit, we have to get him back.
Yeah, I agree.
At some point, you can't just keep waiting. If there's anything that he can last an hour, you'll have to, because this is so important.
This is it now. This is the run.
Oh yeah, and it's so important. And I'm not saying I want somebody to play and wreck the rest of their career because of an injury. And nobody seems to know what these injuries are that he keeps getting. It's clearly something quite bad, and quite often one thing can lead to another. If you've had a bad hamstring, it can lead to any series of other injuries in the same leg. So I suppose that's what happens if you do rush people back. But we need someone who could possibly score a goal, because we just can't score goals. We cannot score goals, and we're also letting them in. That's a different problem. Let's try and score some first, and not be relying on central defenders.
Yeah. Last question before we let you get on with your Easter and eat lots more chocolate and hopefully have a glass of red wine. I'll start by giving my opinion. I think if Everton beat Leicester away, I think if Everton don't get beat by Crystal Palace away, and I think if we beat Newcastle at home and beat Fulham at home, I think we're okay. So I think there's probably 5 games that Everton don't need to win in this running. It will be painful when it happens in the moments when we don't win and the table looks, but I do think Everton don't need to go on this amazing run now. I think there's a number of games that we just have to go and not get beat and win. In your opinion, how do we get out of this season? Would you like to see Everton go to a Crystal Palace and go to a Leicester and play Manchester City and really go for it? Or do you think the manager maybe has to be quite cautious and pick his games that Everton pick points in?
I think we have to try not to lose certain games. So there's just certain games that you've really got to just try not to lose. And that's where I think he's probably going to have to be a little bit more clever with his team selections. But he is limited because it is a poor squad, and particularly attacking options. I mean, you wonder how we could go for it. How do you go for it when you haven't got a fit striker? Because I'm sorry, I don't count Neil Maupay. I just think he's been a disappointment would be the biggest understatement of the season, wouldn't it? God love him. I mean, apparently he's a lovely person, but he's just been hugely, hugely disappointing.
Yeah.
So it's, what do you do to try not to lose? So there are games that we just need to not lose, particularly against the teams in and around that relegation area, your Leicesters. And then there are games that we need to go and try and win. Can beat Man City. But then again, you're not just going to lie down. So, it's tricky, isn't it?
You could play that game. You could play that game a certain way, couldn't you? You could say, like, let's just try and get out of here with a point. But then you could play Newcastle at home a little bit differently, or Fulham at home a bit differently.
The Newcastle one's interesting, isn't it? Because they, on their day, they can be great, and they've got some really good individual players. I don't count Anthony Gordon among them. And that could be a really, really tricky one. There's something. Do you know what? There's no easy games at the moment, is there? Because there's so much riding on them.
That's the one, though. I think that's a Thursday night under the lights, and if you remember last season where Roby scored at injury time, and they were the better team, we had 10 men. I think the Newcastle one's huge. I really do. I think if the ground is on fire that night, I think we can beat Newcastle. I really, really do.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying about the atmosphere. And again, isn't it a shame that we're saying that, we've all got to be up for it to try and get professional footballers to perform. That shouldn't be the case. Look, that team shouldn't need any other incentive apart from the fact that they could get relegated. We shouldn't need sirens and coach greetings and all that, all of those things. They shouldn't need that. They should just be looking as professional sports people that they could be responsible. They could be the group of people that could be responsible for the team being relegated. That should be all. That should be all they need. They shouldn't need all those other things. They did last season, but then we had Richarlison last season, and he didn't need it. He as you say, he promised he was going to do it, and he did. And between him and Pickford and the fans, that's how Everton stayed in the Premier League last season. The Newcastle game will be interesting. It's a night game, atmospheric. There's a bit of needle between the fans. There's a bit of needle between. Well, there'll be a huge amount of needle with Anthony Gordon, won't there? That'll be interesting if he plays. Although his petulance when he got brought off at the weekend.
Did you see how horrible?
Yeah. If I was his manager, I'd just drop him. I'd just say, you're not playing. I'm not putting up with that. I just think it's pathetic. It doesn't surprise me. They're all winnable. they're not all winnable. There's certain games there that are winnable. If
Got to go and win some.
If our players play to the peak of their ability, there's plenty of games left there that are
Yeah.
absolutely 100% winnable. The unfortunate thing is now we're looking at other teams, we're looking at other results. You know, it's what you were talking about on Saturday. We were on our way home from Manchester and you're going, oh God, you know, West Ham have won and, you know, we needed Fulham to do us a favour and they haven't and all this kind of thing. And that's a horrible position to be in, isn't it, when you're looking for other results all the time? Exactly, but you do. I think it's going to be a very tough end to the season again. And I think we're going to be exhausted again and there'll be much wine drunk. And I hope we're still smiling at the end of it, but I don't think there's any guarantees of anything.
I think we'll be all right. I really do think we'll be okay. But what I do think is I think there's going to be painful moments to come. I think this is it now. I think we're in the run. We've looked at the fixtures since, I don't know, we knew we were in trouble in October, November. I think we've all looked at the running. I think we're here now. I think it's massive that we do our part, but rightly or wrongly, I think it's massive that we do our part. I think we stick with them. I like the fact that when Everton got beat by Villa at home, that they got clapped off. I do think it's important that the players don't get the Bournemouth away treatment or the Southampton at home treatment where the fans sort of turned. I think it's important that we do our bit. I do think we'll be okay. I'd love to get you back on, Mel, when we are, and have a season review. If you're up for it, I'll bring wine. How's that sound?
Yeah, let's have an in-person meeting that time in the pub. Definitely.
Yeah,
I think, good. You know, I agree with you. There are winnable games there. There's definitely winnable games there. It's just, I don't have 100% faith in the group of players. I just don't. I just think it's a poor squad. I'm not sure all of them are 100% up for it, despite bringing in a new manager. And I think there'll be a lot of them that are now thinking about what they're going to be doing next season, whether it's with Everton or not, unfortunately, or some of them will be. And I don't think it'll matter as much to a lot of them as it does to us. And that's the really, really sad thing. But I hope we are smiling at the end of the season. I hope it doesn't come down to the last game or two.
No, please no.
I hope it doesn't come down to other people's results, depending on other people's results. Get Calvert-Lewin back in for a few games, get scoring some goals, and try and cut out some of those defensive errors. Simple as that.
Simple. You should be the manager. Why did we appoint Sean Dyche when Mel Harvey is sitting there? I think it's look, me and you make it sound simple, don't we? We make it sound simple, but let's buckle up. Like I said, we're in the run now. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Across the Park podcast or listening to it on the audio platform. If you are on the audio platform, please jump over to YouTube. And once you're on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps us so much. Our friend Mel Harvey, so gracious with their time on bank holiday. I think it's your 5th appearance on the show. We're going to have to start paying you at some point, Mel. But thank you so much for joining us once again on Across the Park podcast.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.